All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to dig into the hidden architecture of illegal gold mining in Ghana. You might know it by its local name, Galamsey, which literally means gather them and sell. But as we're about to see, it's a system that's way more complex than you'd think.
So, when you hear that word Galamsey, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most people, it's this exact image, right? A single miner up to his knees in muddy water holding a shovel. It's a really powerful picture of just raw desperation and survival. And honestly, that's by design.
But here's the thing. That picture, while it's definitely part of the story, is also structurally incomplete. It kind of conveniently hides this massive, organized system that's running things just behind the scenes. You know, it's like seeing one person on an assembly line, but having no idea about the giant factory, the management, or the global distribution network they're a part of. Okay, so let's start right there. Let's just tackle this popular idea that this whole thing is just a messy, chaotic free-for-all, driven only by poverty. Because what might look like just spontaneous chaos on the surface, well, it's actually something much more organized. This isn't just about poverty driving people to dig. No, this is a coordinated deployment of capital. It's about resources being moved around with one goal in mind: profit. I mean, just look at what it takes to pull this off on a large scale. We're talking heavy machinery, excavators, bulldozers. You need a constant supply of fuel for those things. You need serious financial backing. You need access to land that's often supposed to be protected. And on top of all that, you need protection from anyone trying to interfere and a whole network of buyers ready to take the gold. Let's be real, chaos doesn't organize itself like this. This is the blueprint for a real economic system. And get this. Think about what happens after one of those big, high-profile government crackdowns. You see it on the news, right? But then, just a few days later, the mining operations are back up and running, almost like nothing happened. Is that desperation? No way. That is system resilience. That's the sign of a structure that's so deeply embedded, it can just absorb these hits and keep right on going. So if we want to understand what's really going on here, we have to do what you do with any economic system, whether it's legal or not. You've got to follow the money. And that means figuring out who's taking all the risks and who's reaping all the rewards. And that brings us to the absolute core question here. Who controls the resources and who really benefits from all this? See, when you ask that question, it forces you to look away from the guy with the shovel and start searching for the person who's controlling the money. And right here, this is where you see the fundamental, kind of shocking imbalance of the entire system. On one side, you have the miner. What are they risking? Well, basically everything. And on the other side, the sponsor, the financier. They're only risking capital. And it's usually capital they can afford to lose. Think about it. The person who's actually in the pit, the one you see in all the pictures, is risking their body, their life, every single day. We're talking about arrest, serious injury, death from the shafts collapsing on them, and slow poisoning from mercury. The consequences for them are immediate and physical. But the financier? The sponsor? They risk capital. If an excavator gets seized by the authorities, well, that's a business expense, a write-off. They are almost always shielded from any real personal or legal trouble. It's not even in the same ballpark. It's a totally different kind of risk. So this huge gap in who risks what, it shows us that Galamsey isn't some flat, disorganized thing. It's what you'd call a stratified system. It has very clear layers of power, and it's designed so that the people at the very top are protected from the dangers they're creating for everyone at the bottom. And this supply chain? It shows you exactly how the value moves up and away. The gold starts with a miner, who gets the tiniest fraction of its worth. Then it goes to an aggregator, then a bigger buyer, and finally to an exporter who moves it on to the international market. And at every single step, the profit margin gets bigger and bigger. The person taking the biggest physical risk gets the smallest financial reward. The real money is made far away from that muddy pit. Okay, so how on earth is a system like this protected? Well, that brings us to its invisible architecture, the unseen power that holds the whole thing together. And this is such a key distinction to understand. The miner is visible. They're right there, out in the open. So of course, public attention and law enforcement, it's all directed at them. But the real power, the sponsor, the financier who makes the whole operation possible, they remain embedded. They're unseen, hidden within the system.
And this is where we have to start asking some really pointed questions, like who owns the excavators? I mean, that's a piece of machinery worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a huge capital investment. So whose is it? And next, who guarantees them access to protected forest reserves? How does all this heavy machinery get into areas that are supposed to be off limits, often with almost military-like precision? Somebody has to be opening that door, right? And maybe the most telling question of all, when arrests are made, who has the pull to make sure those people are quietly released so the whole system can just reset and start over? You see, when these questions go unanswered year after year, it stops being just a crime. It starts to look a lot like structural tolerance. And what this all boils down to is a core economic pattern that's pretty simple. The profit is privatized, it's captured and kept by a handful of people, but the costs, the poisoned rivers, the destroyed forests, the ruined farmland, all of that is socialized. It's a debt paid for by the public, by everyone. This brings us to what might be the single most important point of this whole explainer, why the story we tell ourselves about this problem, why that narrative matters so much. Just look at this comparison. It says it all. If the story we tell is one of poverty and desperation, then what are our solutions? Well, they're pretty limited. We arrest the laborers, we burn their equipment. But if we see this as a problem of political economy, as a complex economic structure, then suddenly the solutions look very different. We start talking about financial tracking and accountability for the people at the very top. The narrative we choose literally determines the intervention we take. And for decades, the main story has kept the focus on just the tip of the iceberg, on the most visible, most vulnerable people in the whole system. And that leaves the vast, hidden structure completely untouched. I love this quote. Chains are held together from the top. It's such a powerful way to think about it. The miner in the pit might be the weakest link, the most vulnerable one, but they are not the one who designed the chain. The real strength, the resilience of this whole operation, it comes from the top. And so that leaves us with this final, really vital question. When you see the sheer amount of capital involved, the resilience, the clear political protection, you have to ask yourself, is Galamsey just illegal mining, or is it something more? Is it a parallel political economy, a system of power and profit operating right alongside the official state? And if it is, then the most important question we can possibly ask is, who truly sits at the helm?